It's actually an older movement, much, much older. We can say it's actually an eternal movement because it's derived from the Vedas, which are said to be eternal. And even though Brahma manifests the Vedas every day of his life, which is like 4 billion years or whatever it is each day, 400 years. And previous to that, there were other Brahmas also who manifested the same knowledge. So therefore, this knowledge that we have is eternal. But historically speaking, it comes manifest at different times. And it may manifest in different forms. So the latest manifestation was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu 500 years ago when he introduced Nam Sankirtan as the most powerful process for realization, fulfillment, understanding who we are, and attaining the highest bliss. And so, nevertheless, it's not new, it's not invented. It is something which was already there in the Vedas, which are eternal, but was not revealed as such. So he just revealed that. In other words, he made it. He gave us the simplest possible formula for spiritual realization. Spiritual realization, of course, is a general terminology. In the modern world, people don't like to use the word religion because religions often end up having a lot of dogma and rigid beliefs and rituals that no one can explain, and many ideas also which maybe look a little bit contrary to our normal experience and logic. So people get a little suspicious of religion. That's been going on for quite a while. We can say since the Industrial Revolution, Scientific Revolution, and we see people like Copernicus in the Western world and others, when they started making scientific statements, the church got angry and they started persecuting them. So there was a kind of a war between scientific knowledge and religion, and ultimately religion won. And therefore we think that science is the new religion, so to speak. It's truthful, and religion is all superstition, doctrine, etc. So there's kind of a suspicion of it. And so when you talk about religion, say, okay, we're not going to talk about that. We have to base ourselves on rational thought. So that's the modern idea. So when it comes to, nevertheless, even some scientists will admit that we cannot really analyze things and say that everything is matter, because even matter becomes difficult to define ultimately. And in the modern world with quantum physics, then consciousness becomes very apparent within science itself. And then for the last 100 years, science has been trying to figure out how we're going to fit consciousness into science. And they haven't succeeded up until this stage. And they've got all sorts of theories. Then another person will say, that's not right, and he'll make a new theory. And so we have parallel universes and all sorts of other theories that have come out, but no one's come up with a real solution to the problem since it was started about 100 years ago. But anyway, this introduces the idea of consciousness, and somehow it's a problem because science cannot really analyze it properly and quantify it or whatever, so it becomes a problem. However, now that it's kind of admitted, even in science, that consciousness does exist and it is not matter, it is something else, we get a step in the direction of what the Vedic literature is also telling us. So, for instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, this is the first fundamental principle which is announced, that bodies exist, bodies are real, bodies are temporary, but the spirit also exists and is superior. It is also real and it's eternal and it's in the body, but it's completely different from matter. So if we want to talk about spiritual life, spiritual realization, we have to understand Atma, or the soul. So this is a good analysis of things. So in other words, whatever science is dealing with atoms and protons and consciousness, this already stated. in Bhagavad Gita, very simply. There is matter and there is the Atma, which is completely different, which is conscious, and which is separate from the body and eternal. And it goes from body to body. So, that's the elementary knowledge. And if we get that far, of course, it's a big step. So we can say, okay, I'm spiritual, I got this knowledge. And it doesn't depend on religion also. So you could be any religion and have this belief, okay, we're not the body, we're the soul, which is separate from the body. Fine. So the next step, of course, is a little bigger. Well, not bigger, just another step. Most people will be satisfied if they can just get, okay, I understand Atma, self-realization, very good, become peaceful. But Bhagavad Gita goes further than that. And it says, okay, we're not the body, we're the soul, the Atma, spiritual. But then there's another thing we should realize. This Atma should not only realize he's not the body, but he is Atma, different from the body. He should also realize there's a Supreme Atma, Supreme Lord, Supreme Consciousness also. So there's two, and they're not the same, they're different. But they coexist. One is superior to the other. The Supreme One is superior. We are small Atmas. But what's the point? We have a relationship of affection and love between Supreme Lord and the individual Atma, and we can get bliss from that. And that's the whole point of everybody in this material world. Everyone wants to be happy. So we try by material things, and it doesn't seem to work out. So the next is, okay, we're not the body, we're the Atma, and we get a little peace that way. The next step is to establish a relationship between Atma and Supreme Lord. That's where we get our happiness. So that's the final step. So that is what is presented in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and other Vedic literatures. So it's a very simple concept. But if we take this concept, we can actually see how different religions of the world also are reflecting this to some degree. Oops. Okay. So, that's the introduction. So, in what we call Bhakti Yoga, which is described in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we have a process to realize the Atma or the soul and the Supreme Lord. Both, not just one, but both. And the realization takes place using our body, our mind, our intelligence, our perception, but also the Atma. So when we talk about Bhakti Yoga, it's not just doing a bunch of activities with our senses and whatever. We're actually engaging the Atma in activity also. This is what makes it special. And so therefore we get this idea here of planting a seed and then making it grow. So this is the seed of bhakti. And what is bhakti? It's not material. Actually, bhakti is part of Supreme Lord. So we're transposing a bit of the Supreme Lord's energy into ourselves, kind of, implanting it in there as a seed, and then we're making it grow. Yeah? So we say, well, that's a little bit strange. How can we put something which is not the Atma into the Atma? And the answer is, well, Supreme Lord and the individual Atma are very similar. And the soul, individual soul, is very receptive to the Supreme Lord. So it is actually, we can say, a fulfillment of the individual soul to get that energy of the Supreme Lord and make it grow. So planting the seed is the first step in fulfilling the real nature of the individual. And that is complete when we grow that plant of bhakti, which is the Lord's energy, in the jiva. And it becomes fully fixed there and fully matures. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya gives the example. A devotee plants the seed of bhakti in another person, in his heart, so to speak. But what that means is he's helping plant the seed in the Atma, in the jiva. And then it begins to grow, 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 grow. And when it gets mature, the plant is fully mature. It produces flowers. It produces fruit. And then we can give up the body completely, the material body, and we have our spiritual body. And we just enter in the spiritual world. And we associate with the Lord and get our bliss. So in other words, we're cultivating bhakti, but actually we're cultivating the soul ultimately with this plant of bhakti. Yeah? So the soul reaches its true state by this implant of bhakti in it, through the mercy of devotees. And then we hear and chant and remember, and then we gradually grow this plant until it matures fully. So that's the example of the planting the seed. The seed of bhakti is planted by a devotee. So a devotee is a person who has devotion for the Lord. He could be on many levels, highest level, medium level, low level, whatever. But he has a little bhakti at least, a little bit of seed, and he can plant that bhakti in another person, and then it can start growing the plant. However, as we see, the plant needs some soil. And if we don't have proper soil, the seed will not sprout. And if it sprouts and the soil is not good, it will not grow properly. And it may not even grow flowers or fruit. So we need proper grounding for the seed of bhakti in the Atma. What is the proper ground? So Scripture says it is faith, Shraddha. If the jiva, not the mind, not the intelligence, but the jiva develops inclination for the existence of the Lord and service to the Lord, that is the fertile field in which another devotee can plant the seed of bhakti and make it grow. Yeah. So we have to have that favorability in the jiva. And once we get the seed, yes, another devotee plants the seed. So Lord Chaitanya says, by the mercy of Guru and Krishna, you get the seed of bhakti. Yeah? But that doesn't mean that the seed just automatically sprouts and grows by itself. It requires work, cultivation. So this is what we call sadhana bhakti. We do certain activities which help that plant of bhakti grow nicely until it develops 2 little leaves, and then more leaves, then it develops a flower, then it develops fruit. So that's the general idea of bhakti. It's a practice to develop that fruit eventually. And who is doing that sadhana bhakti? Of course, the devotee or the guru and Krishna plant the seed, but the individual is the person responsible for making it grow. So we cannot just throw the responsibility for our salvation upon another person. Say, mercy of God, mercy of devotee, mercy of guru. No. We have to cultivate. If you put the seed in your garden, don't expect somebody else to cultivate it and make it grow. You have to water it, you have to weed, you have to put sunlight, you have to do so many things. Individual intelligent devotee has to learn how to cultivate the plant of bhakti himself. So that is what sadhana is. We have this practice. So in this way, we can begin to grow the plant. In our philosophy, we have, Lord Chaitanya says, Scriptures tell us basically 3 things. Of course, there's many different statements and processes, etc. Ultimately, it's 3 subject matters that Scripture deal with. One is sambandha, which means tattva, which means philosophy, which most people don't like. Very dry. But it's also very necessary. Just as if you're studying any material subject. Yeah, you want to be a doctor, right? Okay. So you want to operate on people or diagnose and give medicines and help people cure whatever. Okay, that's the final result. But it doesn't happen just by itself. You have to learn a lot of things. You have to learn about the material body, you have to learn about the organs, you have to learn about chemicals, you have to learn about oxygen and water and so many things, all these material elements and stuff. You have to learn physics and biology and chemistry and so many things if you're going to do medicine, even though it's not directly, cutting up people and curing them or whatever. So all of this background information necessary. So to practice spiritual life, we do need some basic knowledge about what's real, what's not real. What is matter, what is spirit? What is Atma? Who is God? And if there's God, what are the qualities of God that distinguish him from the individual Atma? And if there's God, does he have one form, does he have many forms? Which form is superior to the other form? And if we come to that's one thing, the tattva, or the knowledge, philosophical knowledge. The second is method. Once we get the knowledge, then we have certain methods we have to develop bhakti. This is called abhidheya. So we say it's bhakti yoga. There are other methods mentioned in Bhagavad Gita and other scriptures, such as karma yoga, jnana yoga, and astanga yoga. These are also methods, but they are secondary. They're for people who cannot directly practice bhakti. So they're preparatory, in other words. So eventually, if we want to get the real highest goal, then we have to practice bhakti yoga. But then that bhakti yoga depends on the actual goal. So that's the third aspect. We cannot separate the practice from the goal. Just as you cannot separate your goal of being a doctor from all of the study you do for 5 years or whatever you do. So that's called prayojana. So there are many goals. Be happy in this material world. That's the goal of karma yoga. Be happy by getting out of the material world. That's the goal of jnana yoga and astanga yoga. Developing pure love of Supreme Lord, called prema, that is the goal of bhakti. And that's the highest goal. So we have to define the goal, and then in relation to that we have process to get to the goal. So for bhakti, goal is prema. We form bhakti, we attain prema. So these are the things that are actually described in scripture. So if we go to Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, we'll find these three elements there. So often Bhagavatam, we're talking about the material elements, the material world, and all this. And why we have to discuss all of this? So that's all that basic information. And then we get into process of bhakti, and then we have pure bhakti and mixed bhakti, etc. And then we're told if we want to get prema, we have to do pure bhakti. And then what is that prema? That's also described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are the three subjects of scripture that we have to learn. So in the process of sadhana bhakti, then, we do need that knowledge. In order to just do our practice of bhakti, we need knowledge of the goal. We have to have preliminary knowledge of all the different elements, like matter, spirit, God, etc. So that's part of our sadhana. So therefore, the devotee who is trying to develop the plant has to put a little bit of effort into learning things. So that's why we have, particularly our movement, compared to other spiritual movements, we got a lot of books. Most movements, maybe they have one book, half a book, a little pamphlet or something like that, and they may have hundreds of thousands of followers, but no real substantial literature. Whereas we have so much literature available. So the knowledge is there, and that's for our sadhana, so we can practice properly. So that's the function. So, as I said, we have sadhana, our practice. And this is defined very precisely in Nectar of Devotion of Rupa Goswami. The basic rule of bhakti, not sadhana, but bhakti in general, is cultivating a relationship with the Supreme Lord without any desire other than the desire to please Krishna. That's the basic definition of bhakti. That'll apply to sadhana bhakti, bhav bhakti, and prem bhakti. Three types of bhakti. That's the general definition. When we come to sadhana bhakti, then the sub-definition is, yes, we have cultivating relationship with Krishna with no material desires, etc. But method is engage the senses and mind, which are material. So in prema, you're not engaging your material senses and mind because you got your spiritual senses and mind developed already. But when we're in the material world, we start out with our material senses and our material mind, and we engage them for Krishna. Of course, the objection is, well, how can you engage material things and get a spiritual result? Well, Krishna is the controller of everything in this material world, including matter and senses and mind, etc. So if he wants, he can give you a spiritual result also. So you get a spiritual result by engaging your mind and senses, etc. if you don't separate it from this first definition of, cultivating a relationship with Krishna with no other desire. And in doing that, then you engage your senses, etc. So this spiritualizes everything. So we are cultivating a relationship with Krishna in the Atma. But we're using these external senses and mind also. Yeah. But it's not that the external activities of our senses is the bhakti itself. We're cultivating this relationship internally, and we're using the senses and mind, etc. So they become spiritualized in the process. So we can't separate the cultivation internally from the external activities. If we start separating it, the process becomes much less powerful. It has effect, but much less powerful. If we kind of join the two together, we get very powerful effect from our bhakti. And then the plant can grow nicely. So here are two unique symptoms of bhakti, which will manifest within sadhana. So if we do sadhana, we should develop these qualities. If we don't develop the qualities, we're not doing bhakti. So something's wrong with our process. So like you grow the plant, you're growing the plant, and a little thing comes up, but then it stops and nothing happens. That means something is wrong. The plant should grow, and it should have two little leaves, and more leaves should grow naturally. So with the process of bhakti, certain things should happen to show that it is developing. So these are the things, kleshagni and subhada. Kleshagni means destruction of klesha, destruction of suffering, material suffering. Subhada means bestowal of good spiritual qualities. So we're getting a negative thing, destruction of all the bad things, and we're getting a production of good qualities, good things as a result. These two things will naturally develop with bhakti. Yeah? Yeah. They may develop suddenly, they may develop gradually. Yeah? And if they develop very quickly, these two symptoms or two leaves, that means that the person is doing his bhakti properly. He may also had background in previous lifetime to help him. And it's a sign that there are minimum or no offenses or aparads. If we have offenses or aparads, process becomes slower. So we get more gradual effect, gradual dissipation of suffering, gradual appearance of good qualities. Okay. So in the scriptures, suffering is analyzed into different elements. So suffering just doesn't mean, okay, we suffer, we get pain in our hand, or we get sick, or whatever, that's suffering. That's the final result. And in karma yoga, they try to get rid of the effects. Just as if you're sick, the doctor will, if you got fever, then the doctor will try to remove the fever, like that. It may not remove the real cause of the fever, but you get rid of the symptoms at least, so you don't feel hot and have a headache or whatever like that. Okay? So bhakti is such, not like karma yoga, which removes the very superficial symptoms. Bhakti gets to the very root of the suffering. And as we see, the root is ignorance or avidya, which manifests in the Atma itself. And so the Atma has ignorance of what? Ignorance of Supreme Lord. No desire to serve the Lord, and no desire to recognize the Lord. So what does that jiva do? That jiva has some consciousness, obviously, because that defines a jiva. He is conscious, but what is he conscious of? Self. I exist. I want to be happy. Independent of anyone else, including the Supreme Lord. That's the first ignorance. This goes a little bit further, and we develop this idea of I, a material concept of ahankara, I. And then we identify with a material body. I am the body. And then what happens to the body? Body develops desires for happiness, with an attachment to those certain objects which will give happiness. That's called raga. And certain things will obstruct that happiness. Maybe it's animals, people, circumstances. So then we develop hatred to those things. And so we start doing activities to get what we want and to avoid or obstruct what we don't want. And most of our life is dedicated to these actions for raga and dvesha. I don't like that, it's going to give me unhappiness, and we do activities for that. So this is described in Bhagavad Gita, raga, dvesha. These two dualities are influencing all of our life when we do all of our activities. What happens is, for the human being, is we get reaction for all of that, karma. And what is the reaction? Suffering. Of course, some karmas, good karmas, we do pious activities, we get material happiness. But most people end up with a balance of the opposite, that is more suffering, because they do sinful activities, activities which cause unnecessary suffering to other living entities, human, animal, or plant, whatever. And so we have to suffer equal result for that. Whatever suffering we cause, we get suffering for that in a future life. That's karma. So when we see sickness and whatever happening in this life, accident, whatever, then we can say, well, it's karma, which means previous lifetime, we did an activity which gave pain to other living entities. Now we're getting pain on ourselves. So this is the final result where we experience the pain. But we have this whole series of, previous causes, all the way up to ignorance or avidya at the top. So the process of bhakti destroys all of that. Starting from the top. Top was where we think we're individual, we're enjoying, and we have a right to enjoy by ourselves. Process of bhakti does the opposite. No. Supreme Lord is the enjoyer. Krishna is the enjoyer. You are the one that gives enjoyment to Krishna. So automatically that erases the avidya. And consequently, if the very source of the ahankara and the raga and dvesha and your actions are gone, then everything gets destroyed. So in this way, bhakti goes to the very root of the problem of our suffering in the material world. So that is destruction of suffering. So immediately when we practice bhakti, that begins to manifest. But it may not be apparent. So we have the case of Ajamil. Of course, he didn't even do bhakti. But at least he uttered the name Narayana, name of Vishnu, which is almost bhakti for him. No devotion, but at least he uttered the name Narayan to name his son. And what happened? All of his karmas, these final results of all of his sinful activities, disappeared. Past, present, and even the future activities of sin that he would commit. No results, no karma at all. Just from chanting the holy name of Narayan once, without devotion. Because that's the power of bhakti can do. So he got liberation in one sense. But the strange thing was, it didn't look like he was liberated. It didn't look like he had changed. for the rest of his life, after he named his son Narayana. He looked like the same sinful rascal. And when he was going to die, the Yamadutas also felt the same thing. He is very sinful. We have to punish him. And then the Vishnu Dutas, they said, no, there's no sin attached to him. He chanted the name Narayan once. He's free. He's pure. So even the Yamadutas, we'll just speak of people in this world, they could not see that all of his karmas were gone. And he looked exactly like the same sinful person as before, but he wasn't. So it may be deceptive. The karmas are getting destroyed, we may not even know it. So when we do bhakti, yes, it destroys the karmas, but we may not see the visible results right now. We may still feel we're suffering or whatever, but actually our karmas are gone. So that's it. Of course, there's a little exception for Ajamil. He had committed no aparads, no offenses in that life or previous life, and therefore he got that very quick effect. And if we do commit aparads, or have committed aparads in previous or this life, then the effect of destruction of our karmas and our asmita, raga, dvesha, etc. will be more gradual. But still, they get destroyed. So anyway, this is the first effect of bhakti. Of course, now karma yoga does not do that, does not destroy your karmas. It kind of alters them a little bit. As I said, you can, like curing your disease, you can get rid of the fever, but you don't get rid of the cause of the fever or whatever. So that's what karma yoga does. Jnana yoga and Astanga yoga, yes, they will destroy the cause, which is avidya, ultimately, by knowledge. That's why it's called Jnana yoga. With knowledge, you destroy the ignorance. You get liberation from the material world, no more karma. But it takes a long time. It is very difficult. In case of Ajamil, it was 1 second. Same result with no bhakti even. Just chant the name Narayana. So bhakti is quicker in doing whatever that is. But of course, bhakti does something more than that. It does not just get rid of your karmas, you also develop prema. So that's even more important for the devotee. So anyway, the first thing is this karma thing, whatever. And bhakti, very special, because very, very quickly it can do that. But simultaneously, bhakti is also beginning to, transform the jiva. So the jiva develops spiritual qualities. This is very distinct from karma yoga, which helps you develop nice sattvic qualities, which are material. So if you're cultivating sattva, then you become a brahmana, and you have all nice qualities as mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, like tolerance and compassion and controlled senses, controlled mind, whatever. Okay. But it's actually material. Sattva is material. These qualities are all material. If you do jnana and yoga, goal is to get rid of all these material qualities and get rid of all karma. And if you get liberation, no qualities at all. With bhakti, we don't try to destroy qualities, but by worshiping Krishna, we develop spiritual qualities, which are very useful for the devotee in serving the Lord. Well, they're not material qualities. So they may look similar to sattva gun material qualities. So just as a sattva gun person will have tolerance and compassion and control of the senses and control of the mind, patience, etc., devotee will have similar qualities. What's the difference? Spiritual qualities ultimately come from Krishna. Material qualities come from the material gunas. That's the difference. So by worshiping Krishna, we develop qualities like Krishna. Krishna has 64 qualities in the spiritual world. So by contact with Krishna, worshiping, we start developing similar qualities, and these become eternal qualities. The qualities in the material world that we develop from sattva are not eternal. You can be a Brahman in this life, you can be a Sudra in the next life. Your qualities are completely different. Qualities keep changing in the material world. By doing bhakti, you develop eternal spiritual qualities, which are favorable for serving Krishna in the spiritual world. So, but this is called subhada. developing wonderful qualities. The main quality of all of that is being compassionate to all living entities in the material world. So that's the number one quality of the devotee that he develops. Of course, we'll see in Krishna, what is his main quality? That is giving mercy to all the jivas in the material world and the spiritual world. So similar. So by doing bhakti, we develop this compassionate attitude of mercy. It's different from that material mercy. Though may look similar, the mercy of the devotee ultimately is to deliver the souls from the material world to the spiritual world to give them prema. Yeah? The mercy of the material world is maybe to get them out of miserable circumstances and give them some food and give them some medicine so that they are not sick. That's material happiness. So the end result is quite different. So anyway, these are the two qualities that begin to manifest within bhakti itself. Oh, okay, these were just the things, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. Abhinivesha means you get completely absorbed in the raga, dvesha, and the activities and the identity with your material body, etc. Get really trapped in that. And all that is destroyed by the process of bhakti. Now, this is just illustrating the end result. After you got your raga, dvesha developing and you do your activities and you get you're frustrated because somebody is interrupting your material happiness, so you punch them. So it's a bad karma. You will get punched back sometime in a future lifetime. Or if not by somebody else, at least something happens to your finger or your toe or whatever. So you get results. This is for the human being, not for the animal or the plant. We can accrue karmas. Why? Because human being has more responsibility, has more intelligence. And not for children, but for adults. So when you're adult, then you have more responsibility. When you're children, you don't get to vote, you don't get so many things. So similarly, you don't have to bear the results of, sinful activity, etc. Your parents have to get the result instead. Because they train you up. So when you're adult, then you do have to take responsibility. Even there is, let's say, some leniency. An adult, any adult, a human being, yes, has karma. But the higher you go, the more responsible you have to be. So if you're sattvic, you're more responsible. You get more karma. Yeah? And if you're tamasic, less karma. So that's why the Sudra can do a lot of things that the Brahmana cannot do in society. For the Brahmana it's a sin, for the Sudra it's not a sin. So it's kind of a fair rule also. Yeah? The more elevated you are, the more responsible you should be. The more knowledge you have, the more you should implement that knowledge. And if you don't do it, then you're going to get very bad results. So the law of karma is quite just that way. Okay, anyway, do you want to do that? Result. And it says subhada means you get all sorts of wonderful qualities, etc. So anyway. So they will manifest, they may not manifest evenly, and they may not manifest all at once. Maybe first you get some good qualities, then later on you get destruction of the suffering, etc. It's not always symmetrical or even. It can happen irregularly to some degree. Okay. So, as I mentioned, by these symptoms, we can, to some degree, measure the success of our bhakti. It's not absolute, but at least we should have a feeling of peace and happiness, spiritual happiness, as we go through the process of sadhana bhakti. And we're not so much disturbed by material things. And of course, because as we develop bhakti, we tolerate more. We don't get so disturbed, even if we do get some karmas or suffering, etc. So they're not so significant anymore. So we don't get such disturbance. Okay. So we started out with the shraddha, or the faith, which is like the fertile field. The mercy of the devotee in Krishna gets us the seed of bhakti. And then the devotee has to do devotional activities, which we call bhajana kriya, that's bhakti yoga sadhana, in order to make the seed sprout and grow. So that's what happens. So we get the mercy of devotees. We begin the process of bhakti by the mercy of devotees. They will teach us how to do pure bhakti. So that's sadhu sangha. And when we start, then we're starting, so we do have a lot of problems. We're coming with all of our previous desires and whatever upbringing from this life and that's previous life, whatever. We may have fears, we may have anger, we may have so many different problems. These are called anarthas, obstacles. So when we begin, we will have a lot of obstacles. As we do the process of bhakti, then kleshagni takes place. We get rid of the raga, devesha, and abhinavesha, all these things. They get decrease. So we get less anarthas, less problems. So in the beginning stage, it's because we do have all these problems, and we're doing the bhakti, there can be disturbance. So therefore, our bhakti is unsteady in the beginning. We have problems. As we advance in the bhakti, in association of devotees, then gradually the anarthas, the problems, get less and less, the bhakti increases, and then we come to a stage of steadiness or nishtha. So it is always favorable to do bhakti steadily. So though it may seem for us to be very far off goal to get prema, which we can't really understand in great detail, at least our immediate goal should get from the unsteady state, anishtata, to the steady state of nishtha, where we can practice bhakti steadily, and even if there are some obstacles and anarthas, we tolerate them, and we continue our bhakti anyway. And we continue more, and of course the anarthas get less and less, and the bhakti becomes stronger. So therefore, we should try to surpass that unsteady state in the beginning. So in Madhurya Kadambini, the Vishnu Chakravarti describes some different qualities that arise, which will be symptoms of unsteady bhakti. So of course, first we have the faith there. So we have faith in the scriptures, faith in following the instructions of scripture. Then we begin the process, but because we have anarthas, then it may be a little bit unsteady. So we do this in association of devotees. So as I said, anishtha state is not so good. So we have to get to the nishtha state. So he identifies these different symptoms of the unsteady devotee in the beginning because of the prominence of anarthas. So the first one is this utsaha mai. Utsaha in itself is not a bad thing. In Nectar of Instruction, utsaha is one of the 6 favorable qualities for a devotee. That is enthusiasm to do bhakti. In this case, it's a little bit different. It refers to a person who begins the process of bhakti with a sense of enthusiasm, but we say it's largely mixed with pride. So we often see that people that begin something, they're very excited and proud. If we go on for some time, maybe a few weeks, and then the enthusiasm dies down more, like that. So Vishnu Chakravarti gives the example of a young boy, actually a young boy or girl, I guess. They go to school, yeah? So before they go to school, you can't go to school, you're not old enough, you got to be, 5 years old, 6 years old, or whatever. Yeah, so you can't go. So they get very eager to go to school and whatever. Yeah? And then finally, first day of school comes and they dress up in their uniforms or whatever and go with their friends and go to first day of school. They're very excited and they come home and yes, I got to school like that. And then they look at the younger brothers and sisters and say, oh, you useless people there. I'm going to school, you're not going to school. I'm superior to you. You should listen to me. I'll teach you everything. Yeah? So this is the false enthusiasm of a new devotee. Often of course, they're very enthusiastic, but they may be over-enthusiastic, and they may cause a lot of problems also, especially for parents. So they go to the parents and tell them, insult them, and say, you're all nonsense. You're worshiping devatas. You're worshiping Shiva. Throw Shiva out. They may make radical statements or whatnot. You should all take sannyas or something. So they can do very, very extreme. In great enthusiasm and beginning devotional service. So that's a sign of a neophyte. Oops. How do I get rid of it? Okay, whatever it is. So the second one is his sporadic endeavor, gana tarlata. Thick and thin, basically, concentrated and dilute, which means that sometimes you're very enthusiastic to do sadhana bhakti, like chant or hear and come to the temple. At other times, no interest at all. And you may fluctuate back and forth. 1 week nice, 1 week not so nice. Like this, go back and forth. So that's another symptom of unsteadiness. Yeah? Third one is called vyuda vikalpa, or extensive speculation, or indecision. So the person who begins devotional service is very enthusiastic, and he makes all sorts of plans about what you're going to do. You do this or that, be a famous preacher, go around, take sannyas, and travel around the world, and make thousands and thousands of devotees like that. And they think like that because he sees, so many devotees with preaching very enthusiastically. But then he associates with some grihastas, and he says, no, that's sannyas, maya. We should all become nice grihastas and have families and raise our children nicely to become devotees. This is the best thing to do. So he cannot really decide, but based on temporary whims, he develops all sorts of goals, like that. So that's another problem. Another one is to be Sangara means war, battle. And Visha means material objects. So we're at a war with the material world. Sometimes we lose, we get defeated. So we see the guy there with his legs and arms broken or whatever. He got in a fight with material energy and he lost. He got defeated by Maya. So sometimes he gets defeated, sometimes he may win. But there's a constant struggle in the beginning, not to go back to the material world. So that's another, symptom of anishita. Another one is inability to uphold vows. We make a vow, and we can continue for 1 week, and then we gradually dissipate, go down, 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 down. So we may say, I'll chant, 16 rounds every day, and then gradually goes to 10 rounds, and 8 rounds, and 6 rounds, as we go on after a few months. Then we're back to 2 rounds or something. Or we may say, I'm going to come to the temple every day, and then gradually, over several weeks, we're back to once a week or something like that. So we can make all sorts of vows, but we can't keep steady. Of course, it is wise to make vows that we are practical, and we can remain steadily. And once we get that minimum vow, then we can start increasing gradually. But in the beginning, we may make exaggerated vows. We have inability. And then the last one is called Taranga Rangani, which is suitable for Australia. They like to play in the waves. So that's what it really means, playing in the waves. So in devotional service, we get lots of waves, which may look very nice. So what are the waves? The waves are the results that we get from bhakti. So it is said if one becomes a devotee, we get all sorts of accompanying benefits. Yeah? So very easily you can get fame, you can get following, you can get prestige and position, you can get money, etc. So all these things will come with bhakti. But a neophyte devotee will begin to think that these are signs of advancement in devotional service, and therefore I should utilize them for my enjoyment. So if we become attached to those results in a material way, this becomes enjoying the waves. Huh? So we have to be very careful that, yes, these things come, but we should treat them with detachment and use them only for the service of Krishna. So these are some of the symptoms of a person who is anishita. And by understanding the symptoms, we can actually identify people who are maybe at this stage, or we can identify ourselves. Also, we have these similar type of problems. And the idea is that we should go beyond that. We should get to the nishta stage. How? By cultivating that plant of bhakti properly, with proper hearing, chanting, etc. Then gradually we can overcome these anarthas and get to nishta, and we do steady devotional service. Okay, any question there?
Raj, can a practicing devotee who has not perfected bhakti, can such devotee go to hell?
Can you go to hell? Well, we have the example of Ajamil. He wasn't even a devotee. He just said, name Narayana, no hell. So what to speak of a serious devotee, or even an unserious devotee? And we have examples of mixed devotees like Dhruva. He didn't even want to get prema, he just wanted to get a kingdom. So he worshipped Vishnu, and eventually he got a kingdom, but he also got Vishnu. So the results of bhakti are extraordinary, and definitely beyond material things. One can go to hell if one commits serious aparads. Then one can go to hell. Mm-hmm.
So these are the qualities for Bhajana Kriya.
Mm.
So you say for myself that I am exhibiting the symptoms. So this is a stage prior to anartha-nivritti.
Well, if we're at this stage, we do bhakti and then anartha-nivritti takes place. It's not kind of simultaneously, I suppose we can say. Simultaneously, anartha-nivritti is taking place, so these things should become less and less. Yeah. And then finally we get to nishta after anartha-nivritti. It doesn't mean all the anarthas are gone, but at least they're sufficiently gone that the bhakti is stronger, and so we can do bhakti steadily. Yes.
That sometimes, like in Bhagavad Gita, we say mind is higher than the senses. If one performs a devotional service with the mind, or meditating on the pastime of Lord, would that be considered as a devotional service, or?
Oh, yeah. Well, if you look in Nectar Devotion, we have 64 angas of bhakti, and we get engagement of all the senses, like hearing for the ear, and taking prasadam for the tongue, and seeing the deity for the eye, whatever. So we can engage all the senses. And for the mind, then there is smaranam, remembering the Lord and His pastimes and His names. And then there is jhana, meditating on the form of the Lord and the pastimes of the Lord. That's also part of bhakti. Of course, in the beginning stages of bhakti, it may be a little bit difficult for people to do smaranam. So that's why we say our main item is kirtana. And if we do kirtan properly, it will also involve the mind, it will also involve the ear. So kirtan also involves smaranam and shravanam. So it's a very nice combination. And if we do that properly, then eventually we can go to stages of dharana and jhana and samadhi even. So then that way the mind gets engaged. Of course, it is also said that all types of bhakti basically can be resolved into two rules. Always remember Krishna, his mind, and never forget him, mind.
You mentioned that devotee association would help the Bhakti-Lata Bij
Yes.
journey, but then we understand that, but when we see the example of Vibhishan, he was not in association of any
Who?
devotee.
Vibhishan, okay.
Yes, so how do we understand this concept?
Yeah. So association very important. we may not get constant association due to different circumstances. That's kind of unfortunate. But even then, we can succeed by the mercy of Krishna. But for most devotees, it is best to have association. Of course, people also point out Bharat Maharaj didn't have an association, therefore he started remembering the deer. No one could say that's nonsense. So he kept taking care of the deer, and then he remembered the deer when he died, then he became a deer, whatever. So no association in that sense. So better for most devotees to have that association. Then if their anarthas begin to grow, the other devotees can notice that, and they can tell them. Also, if he doesn't notice, they can tell, so they can assist. So in cultivating the plant of bhakti, we hear and chant, that's like watering the plant. But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says, you should build a fence around the plant to keep out the unwanted animals and the elephant. So what is the fence? The fence is the devotees. So the devotees help protect you from aparadhs and all sorts of things. So it's always good to have the Sangha.
What is the best state, what's the best state of mind to practice bhakti in? Fear or confidence?
Fear or?
Fear that we don't make aparadhs while doing everything and considering ourselves to be like trying to be humble but believing that we are nothing, or in a state of confidence, yes, or in a state of mentally, instead of confidence that, okay, even if I'm not capable, I'm trying, I'm doing this, and God will save me, Krishna will.
Yeah, well, it's kind of somewhere in between. Fear itself generally is not the best thing. We're saying bhakti means devotion. So we're trying to develop affection. If we have fear there, that will obstruct the devotion. And especially in Krishna, with worship of Krishna, we're trying to develop a more intimate affection. So that fear, if it's there, then we don't quite get close to Krishna at all. With Vishnu, of course, there is reverence, which is kind of like fear. So that's acceptable with some forms of the Lord. Or Nrsimhadev, for instance, so you have a little fear because he is so powerful and ferocious. But Krishna, basically, we really don't want that fear even, in the normal sense of the term. So we emphasize more the devotion. But you mentioned humility, etc. So that is also inherent in devotion itself. It does not necessarily imply fear. But it means that we realize our insignificance in front of the Supreme Lord. Yeah? And that will take place even with Krishna. So, in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Sanatana Goswami says that this humility is a mark of the devotee. And the more advanced the devotee is, the more humble they become. And so, the greatest devotee is Radha. And she is the most humble of all the devotees. So therefore, it's very intrinsic to bhakti, and even for bhakti to Krishna. So Radharani is the greatest devotee of Krishna, and she has the most humility of all. So that's inherent in bhakti also. It's not necessarily related to fear. Okay.
As you said, Ajamila did not commit an offense in the previous life or in the present life?
Both.
Yeah. So, but if he didn't commit any offense in the previous life, how do you understand he was performing all the abnormal activities?
Sin. Well, sin is one thing, aparad is different. Aparad is related to devotees. Sin is related to living entities and human beings in general. So then you can do those without committing up. You can do a lot of sinful activities as long as they're not devotees. No violence against devotees, violence against brahmanas or whatever, but if they're devotees, then it would be aparad. So apparently he didn't have any violent activities against Vaishnavas or Krishna in previous lifetimes. But he was just very sinful, whatever. So, for general living entities. Okay.
So Jagai and Madai, so they were committing offenses to the devotees?
Everybody. They're operatis, not the sinful. So the example is given to show that Lord Chaitanya is so merciful, unlike Krishna, that he's very merciful even to the operatis, and he doesn't kill them. Of course, Krishna is merciful to the operatis, like Shishupal, he chops off his head, whatever, but he gets to the spiritual world also. But Lord Chaitanya doesn't even cut off their heads, and he's merciful to the Jagai and Madai. Okay, fine. Hare Krishna.